Zoe's life had never been easy. Often at 8, she grew up learning to survive with her own hands. When she finally gained admission to Riverlands University, she knew one thing for sure: she would have to fund everything herself. Every afternoon after lectures, she roasted corn on a small charcoal stand by the dusty campus gate, the smoke burning her eyes, the heat scorching her face. Students passed by, some with pity, most with indifference, but Zoe kept her smile. Despite her hustle, nights were hard. She often studied under the dim bulb of her tiny room, the smell of smoke still stuck to her clothes. She had no family, no guardian, no sponsor, only her dream of becoming a nutrition scientist. And though many mocked the corn girl, Zoe never stopped believing that someday, her life would change. The morning began with the same routine: lectures, note-taking, and rushing out to set up her roasting stand before hungry students flooded the gate. Zoe arranged the fresh corn she bought on credit, praying the smoky aroma would attract enough customers. Sweat dripped down her forehead as the flames rose, but she kept walking, humming a soft tune to calm her nerves. That day, however, she couldn't shake off the weight in her chest. Fees were due in 2 weeks. The balance was huge, far beyond what roasted corn profits could cover. If she didn't pay, she would be forced to defer the semester. As the sun dipped behind the campus buildings, Zoe stared at the pile of unsold corn and whispered, "God, please, help me." While Zoe packed her roasted corn in a small basin, a tall woman dressed in a flowing green veil approached silently. Her steps were graceful, almost floating. Zoe assumed she was a lecturer or one of the wealthier parents who occasionally visited the campus. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and stood straight. The woman's voice was calm and deep. "How much for everything?" Zoe blinked, confused. "All the corn." She nodded. "Yes. All." Without bargaining, without hesitation, the woman paid triple the price. Then, instead of taking the corn, she simply said, "Tomorrow, be here. I will return." And just like that, she walked away into the fading sunlight, leaving Zoe stunned. The next morning, rumors spread across campus like wildfire. Some students claimed they had seen Zoe talking to a wealthy philanthropist. Others joked that Zoe had found a secret sponsor. Zoe ignored them, focusing instead on cleaning her stand and arranging fresh corn. Her heart fluttered each time she remembered the woman's voice, so calm, so sure, almost familiar. By noon, the whispers grew louder. A group of girls passed her stand, laughing loudly. "She thinks selling corn will make her rich," one mocked. Zoe's cheeks burned, but she stayed quiet. The only thing that mattered was whether the woman would return as she promised. Just as the sun touched the horizon, the mysterious woman appeared again, dressed in the same flowing green veil. Students turned to stare, her presence felt powerful and strange. Zoe stepped forward nervously, unsure what to expect. The woman handed her a sealed brown envelope and whispered, "Your days of worry are over." Inside the envelope was a stamped receipt, tuition paid in full, the entire year. Zoe's niece weakened. Tears blurred her eyes. She looked up to thank the woman, but she was already walking away, moving quickly, disappearing before Zoe could even ask her name. Within hours, the whole campus buzzed with excitement. Everyone wanted to know who the mystery woman was and why she had paid fees for a girl selling roasted corn. Some claimed she was a politician's wife. Others said she was a benefactor from the university board. Many simply assumed Zoe was lucky. Zoe, however, felt uneasy. Gratitude mixed with confusion. Why would a stranger pay her fees without explanation? Why did her presence feel oddly familiar? That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail: the woman's walk, her voice, the pattern of her veil. Something about her stirred a memory Zoe didn't understand. The next morning, Zoe was summoned to the dean's office. Her heart raced as she entered. Dean Becky, a stern man with sharp eyes, studied her carefully. Zay, he began, do you know this woman? Is she related to you? Zay shook her head. No, sir. She's a stranger. He nodded slowly, but his eyes remained narrow. Strange, he murmured. Your benefactor used a name we haven't heard in years. A name connected to this university's darkest history. Zay's stomach tightened. What name, sir? The dean hesitated, then said, Professor Naye Marembe. Zay froze. That was the name of her mother. Zay felt her breath leave her body. She had never spoken her mother's name to anyone on campus, not to lecturers, not to friends, not to anyone. Dean Becky watched her closely, his eyes full of concern and suspicion. Your mother, he said slowly, was once a researcher here. Brilliant. Respected. And then, something happened that forced her to vanish. Zay shook her head, trying to control her trembling voice. Sir, my mother died years ago. She couldn't have paid my fees. She couldn't be here. But the dean leaned forward. The signature on the receipt matches her old university documents. Exactly. His words pierced Zay's heart like a blade. She stumbled out of the office, her mind spinning. Had someone forged the name? Was it a cruel prank? Or, could her mother somehow be alive? The woman in the green veil suddenly felt less like a stranger and more like a ghost from a past Zay had never fully understood. Determined to uncover the truth, Zay spent the next day searching every corner of the campus. She asked security guards, shop owners, hostel workers, anyone who might have seen the veiled woman. Some claimed they saw her near the science block. Others insisted she walked into the chapel. One cleaner swore the woman disappeared into thin air near the old staff quarters. Zay grew frustrated. How could someone so striking leave no trace? Despite her exhaustion, she felt something deep inside, an instinct she couldn't explain, pushing her to keep searching. When the sun began to set, Zay found herself standing near the abandoned old laboratory building, a place rumored to be haunted. She hesitated, but a chill in the air made her step forward. The silence there felt heavy, almost watchful. For the first time in years, Zay wondered if the truth about her mother had been buried on purpose. The next day, Zay visited the university archives, hoping to find more records of Professor Naye Marembe. The elderly archivist, Mama Kenga, led her to a dusty cabinet filled with old staff files. They flipped through folders until Mama Kenga pulled out one that made her pause. This is your mother, she whispered. As Zay held the file, her hands shook. Inside was a photograph, her mother standing proudly in a green veil identical to the one the mysterious woman wore. Zay stared at the picture, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it echo in her ears. The resemblance was undeniable. The same height, same graceful posture, same eyes that felt like they could see into your soul. But this photo is from 20 years ago, Mama Kenga murmured. Zay felt cold all over. If the woman who paid her fees looked exactly like her mother years before she died, something was terribly wrong. Zay returned to the abandoned lab. This time, she wasn't alone. A young man appeared behind her, Tomosi, a quiet laboratory assistant known for minding his own business. You're looking for her, aren't you? He asked softly. Zay stiffened. Who? Tomosi swallowed hard. The woman in the veil. I saw her enter this building 2 nights ago. I tried to follow, but she disappeared inside. Zay felt a cold wave roll over her. Did she say anything to you? Tomosi nodded slowly. Just one sentence. Tell the con girl her mother's work is not finished. Zay nearly collapsed. Her mother had been a nutrition scientist, brilliant, radical, working on crops that could fight malnutrition. Had someone revived her research? Or stolen it? Tomosi placed a trembling hand on the rusted lab door. Zay, whatever happened here years ago didn't end. I think you've just walked back into the middle of it. The next morning, Zay confronted the dean again. "Sir, tell me everything about my mother." Dean Becky hesitated, but something in Zoe's determined eyes softened him. He locked the office door and pulled out a locked drawer. Inside was a red folder stamped classified. "Your mother discovered something extraordinary," he whispered. "A drought-resistant variety of maize, rich in nutrients, cheap to produce, and capable of ending hunger across rural Africa." Zoe's eyes widened. That was her dream. The dean nodded. But powerful people didn't want that discovery made public. It threatened major agricultural companies. One night, her laboratory burned down. She vanished. Some said she fled. Some said she was silenced. Zoe felt tears stain her eyes. And now someone wearing her veil, someone using her name, paid my tuition. The dean sighed. Yes. And that means the past is no longer hiding. That night, Zoe couldn't sleep. She tossed on her thin mattress, her mind tangled in fear and hope. Just as she began drifting off, she heard a soft knock on her door. Her heart leaped. Carefully, she opened it, only to find a small laptop on the floor. No note. No footsteps. No sound. Hesitantly, she took it inside. The moment she touched the keyboard, the screen lit up on its own. A video began to play. Grainy. Shadowy. And then, her mother's face appeared. Alive. Older, but unmistakably her mother. Zoe gasped and covered her mouth. "Zoe," the recorded voice whispered, "if you are watching this, it means the danger has returned. And only you can finish what I started." Zoe felt the world shake around her. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been hiding from enemies more powerful than Zoe ever imagined. The video continued, revealing a secret lab her mother had built far from campus, hidden in a forest outside the city. Her mother explained how she developed a second, more advanced version of the maize. One that not only survived drought but thrived in poor soil, producing high yields for struggling farmers. "This crop can save millions," her mother said. "But that is why they will never allow it." Zoe listened in stunned silence. Her mother had risked everything to protect her research. But before the video ended, her mother added one final instruction: the formula is encrypted. Only my bloodline can unlock it. "Zoe, they will come for you." The screen went black. Zoe sat frozen. Someone had revived her mother's project. Someone had paid her fees to pull her into the same dangerous world. And now, there was no turning back. The next day, Zoe noticed a man in a black coat following her around campus. He pretended to read newspapers, lingered near her lecture halls, and stood by the cafeteria entrance pretending to use his phone. Every time she made eye contact, he looked away. Fear slithered into her chest like cold smoke. Was he watching her because of her mother's research? Later that evening, while she roasted corn near the gate, the man approached her stand. "You're Naya Marembe's daughter," he said quietly. Zoe dropped the roasting stick. "Who are you?" Instead of answering, he placed a small flash drive beside the pile of roasted corn. "Protect this. Others will kill for it. She trusted only you." Zoe's hands trembled as she reached for it. Before she could speak, the man vanished into the crowd. The next morning, Adiz walked into the campus administration block with her receipt and the strange woman's scholarship confirmation. Students in the hallway whispered as she passed, some in admiration, others in disbelief. Adiz kept her head down, her heart still pounding from the previous night's blessings. Yet even as she smiled, a small fear tugged at her chest. Why would a wealthy stranger suddenly pay her entire tuition? And why did her eyes look so familiar, like someone who had watched her from afar for years? Inside the dean's office, she sat on a wooden chair while the dean adjusted his glasses. He stared at the document for a long moment, then at her. "Adiz," he said carefully, "you must be very cautious. This woman, Madame Chinya, does not sponsor students without purpose. She chooses selectively, and her choices are strategic. The dean leaned forward slightly. This is not ordinary generosity. There is something she wants. Adis swallowed hard. Sir, do you know her personally? The dean sighed. Everyone knows her. She owns half the businesses around this region. Some say she pulls strings even in government. But what concerns me is this: she does nothing without reason. You must protect yourself. As Adi stepped out of the office, the sun seemed brighter than usual, almost mocking her rising fear. She remembered Madame Chinya's intense gaze the night she paid the tuition, the way she looked at Adis like someone studying a long-lost memory. The blessing that once felt like a miracle now felt like a door opening into a corridor she wasn't prepared to walk through. Still, Adis squared her shoulders. She had survived life as an orphan. She would survive whatever came next. When Adis finished her classes and headed toward her roasting spot by the school gate, she noticed a black Toyota Prado parked across the road. The windows were tinted, but she could feel eyes on her, studying her every move. As she arranged her roasted corn, pretending not to notice, the back window of the SUV slowly slid down. Madame Chinya sat inside, her expression unreadable, her gold earrings catching the evening sun. Adis, she called softly. Adis' heart skipped. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. Good evening, Ma. Madame Chinya's gaze traced the small roasting stand, the burnt charcoal, the smoke rising around Adis like a shroud. You still work here? She asked, sounding more like a statement than a question. Yes, Ma, Adis replied. This is how I survive. Something flickered in the woman's eyes: pity, anger, guilt. Adis couldn't tell. I want you to stop selling here, Madame Chinya said finally. Focus on your studies. I will take care of everything you need. Adis froze. The words sounded like a blessing, but they carried an invisible chain. Ma, you've already done so much. I cannot. You can, Madame Chinya interrupted firmly. There are reasons for my interest in you. Reasons you will understand soon. Adis' chest tightened. The dean's warning echoed again in her mind. Nothing from Madame Chinya was ordinary. Before she could respond, the SUV window slid up. The Prado drove away, its tires spraying dust into the trembling. For the first time since receiving the scholarship, the miracle felt like a shadow stretching behind her, long, dark, and full of secrets waiting to surface. The girls' hostel was already buzzing by the time Adis returned that night. She barely stepped through the hallway when two girls rushed past her, giggling loudly. That's her. The girl Madame Chinya picked. Imagine. From roasting corn to riding in a Prado. Adis ignored them, clutching her small bag as she headed to her corner of the shared room. But the whispers followed her like shadows. Some girls eyed her with envy, others with suspicion, as though she had done something unholy to deserve such sudden favor. Her roommate, Kamsi, a chubby girl with a kind face, looked up from her notes. Adis, people are talking nonsense. Don't mind them. Adis smiled weakly. I didn't ask for this attention. Kamsi hesitated before speaking again. They say Madame Chinya only helps people she has connections with. She lowered her voice. Some say she once had a daughter she lost years ago. Adis frowned. What does that have to do with me? Kamsi shrugged. Campus gossip. You know how people talk. But Adis couldn't shake the discomfort rising in her chest. Could the woman's interest truly be that deep? Why did everyone seem to know something she didn't? Later that night, as the hostel lights dimmed and quiet settled, Adis stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Madame Chinya's gaze replayed in her mind, those eyes filled with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. The woman knew more about her than she had revealed. And suddenly, for the first time, Adis wondered if her past, the one she thought was buried with her parents, was not as forgotten as she believed. The next morning, Addis decided to visit the orphanage where she spent her childhood. She needed clarity, any clue about her past, her parents, or the wealthy woman who seemed to watch her like a long-lost guardian. The matron, Mama Ijoma, was shocked to see her but welcomed her warmly. "My daughter, look at you," the matron said, pulling her close. "University student. I'm proud." "Ma," Addis whispered, "did anyone ever come looking for me when I was younger?" Mama Ijoma paused. Her eyes darted briefly to the office door. "Why do you ask?" "There is a woman. Madam Chinya. She paid my tuition. She acts like she knows me." The matron's expression tightened. After a long silence, she walked to an old metal cabinet and pulled out a dusty file. She opened it slowly, as if revealing something she had buried for years. Inside was a single folded letter. "Addis, this arrived at the orphanage when you were 3, she said quietly. "I was instructed never to give it to you unless the past came knocking." Addis' fingers trembled as she unfolded the old paper. The handwriting was elegant, the ink slightly faded. "Forgive me. I cannot take her with me now. But when she grows, I will return. I must. She is the only innocent thing left from the storm I survived." Addis' breath caught. "Who wrote this?" The matron didn't answer immediately. She placed a gentle hand on Addis' shoulder. "Child, there are truths that shake even grown hearts." Addis felt the world shift beneath her feet. Someone from her past had promised to return. Was it Madam Chinya? "Addis, the letter was signed," the matron said softly. Addis flipped the paper, her heart thudding. At the bottom was a name written in elegant cursive. "C. Nwokoi." The air left her lungs. Nwokoi. The name echoed around her like a drumbeat. "Ma, is that?" "Yes," the matron whispered. "Chinya Nwokoi. The same woman who sponsors half this region. The same woman who paid your fees." Addis staggered back, gripping the table. "But, why would she leave me? Why would she abandon me in an orphanage?" Mama Ijoma closed the file with a heavy sigh. "She came once. Years ago. She was crying, shaking. She said keeping you would ruin your life. Said she needed to disappear for your safety." "For my safety?" Addis repeated in confusion. "She never explained. But she begged us to protect you. She paid for everything secretly. Your books. Your uniforms. Even some of your hospital bills." The world felt unreal, like Addis was watching someone else's story. "So all my life, she has been there." "In the shadows," the matron replied. "Always watching. Always providing." Addis pressed a hand over her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. She remembered the way Madam Chinya looked at her, with too much familiarity, too much pain. She wasn't just a stranger offering help. She was the woman who abandoned her. But also the woman who never truly left her. Now the truth was rising like dawn, slow, sure, and impossible to hide. Addis returned to campus with a storm inside her. Her mind replayed every moment she had shared with Madam Chinya, every silence, every lingering stare, every unspoken message. What was she supposed to do? Confront her. Ask why she left her in an orphanage. Demand explanations she might not be ready to hear. She didn't know. But fate did not give her time. Later that evening, as Addis walked past the faculty block, she saw the same black Prado parked in its usual discreet corner. The driver stepped out when he saw her. "Madam wants to see you," he said politely. Addis froze. I'm not ready." "She insists," the driver replied, holding the door open. Inside the SUV, Madam Chinya sat with her hands clasped tightly on her lap. Her usually fearless expression was replaced with something softer, something almost vulnerable. "Adiz," she said, her voice low, "I hoped you would not discover the truth yet." Adiz swallowed hard. "So it's true. You knew me since I was a child?" Madame Chinya nodded slowly. Pain flickered across her face. "Yes. Why did you leave me?" The woman closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Because keeping you would have destroyed everything. And because there were powerful people who wanted to destroy me and anyone connected to me." She opened her eyes again. "Including you." Adiz felt a chill. "So you hid me," she whispered. "I hid my greatest treasure," Madame Chinya replied. "I have lived with that guilt every day." The car fell silent, the air thick with decades of secrets finally clawing their way to the surface. The Prado was silent except for the hum of the engine. Adiz stared at Madame Chinya, her heart torn between anger, confusion, and a strange ache she didn't want to name. The woman looked smaller now, broken even, like someone who had spent years running from shadows only she could see. "You don't understand the enemies I made," Madame Chinya continued. "People who would burn down my life just to destroy my legacy. When your father died, everything turned against me." "My father?" Adiz whispered, shaken. "You knew him?" Madame Chinya nodded painfully. "He was the reason you exist. The reason I lived. And the reason powerful men wanted me gone. When they realized I had a child, I knew they would use you against me." Adiz felt her throat tighten. "So you left me in an orphanage?" "I left you where you would be safe," the woman said desperately. "I watched from afar. But I could not reveal myself. Not until the danger passed." "Has it passed now?" Adiz asked. "No," Madame Chinya admitted. "But I couldn't stay away anymore. When I saw you struggling, selling corn, suffering, to a stop near the hostel." Before Adiz stepped out, Madame Chinya grabbed her hand gently. "Whatever you think of me, whatever anger you carry, you must know this: I never stopped loving you." Adiz blinked rapidly as her eyes filled with tears. She didn't reply. She simply stepped out of the car and shut the door behind her, leaving the woman alone with her regrets. That night, Adiz lay awake thinking about the truth she now carried. A truth powerful enough to shatter the campus if it ever came out. The next morning, Adiz walked into campus feeling like the ground beneath her feet had changed. She wasn't sure if it was her posture or her silence, but students stepped aside as she passed. Something about her seemed different. Or maybe she was simply aware of things others could only guess. But rumors are hungry things. By midday, whispers crawled through the school like wildfire. They said she's related to Madame Chinya. No wonder the woman paid her fees. Maybe she's her love child. Adiz felt each rumor like a slap. She had spent her life blending into the background, only to become the center of a story she didn't ask for. During break, she sat alone under an old almond tree, trying to calm her breathing. Kamsi hurried over with a troubled face. "Adiz, you need to see this." She handed her a phone. A popular gossip blog had posted a headline. "Who is the mysterious student capturing Madame Noko's attention?" with her picture underneath. Adiz's heart dropped. "How did they?" Kamsi bit her lip. "Someone took a photo of you entering the Prado yesterday. People are saying many things." Of course they were. Adiz wanted to scream. To run. To disappear again like the child she once was. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked toward the administration building. If Madame Chinya wanted to bring her into the light, then the shadows around her were coming too. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The dean's office smelled of old books and polished wood. When Adiz walked in, he closed the door immediately and locked it. His face was troubled. "I warned you," he said quietly. "Her involvement is not simple." Adiz sat down, fingers clenched in her lap. "Sir, who exactly is Madame Chinya? I need the truth." The dean hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file with a red sticker labeled, "Confidential." He placed it gently on the table. "This is everything the school has recorded about her interactions over the years. She has sponsored students, yes, but also intervened in political affairs, business disputes, and even legal cases. The woman has influence, more than you know." He opened the file to a page with a black and white photo of a younger Madame Chinya standing beside a tall man. "Your father," the dean whispered. Adi's breath caught. The man had her eyes. "His death changed her," the dean continued. "And after his passing, she became the target of men who wanted his empire." Adi swallowed. "So I'm connected to that empire." "You are the last thing left of it," the dean said softly. "And that makes you valuable. Too valuable." Adis felt the room closing in. She wasn't just a poor student anymore. She was a key, one many people wanted to possess. Her life was no longer ordinary. And she wasn't sure she wanted the destiny being forced upon her. Night fell heavy and silent. Adis was heading back to the hostel when she noticed footsteps behind her. At first, she ignored them. Campus was always busy. But when she took a left turn and the footsteps matched her pace, she felt her heart jump. She quickened her steps. The footsteps quickened too. "Adis," someone shouted behind her. She froze. A man stepped out from behind a tree, tall, rugged, dressed in black. His face was unfamiliar, but his stare was sharp and calculating. "You're Adis Nwokoi, right?" he asked with a strange smile. "I'm just Adis," she whispered. "No," the man replied, stepping closer. "You're worth more than you know." Adis stumbled back. "Please. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but we do." He reached into his pocket. Before he could pull anything out, bright headlights flashed across them. A loud honk followed. The black Prado screeched to a stop. Madame Chinya's security man jumped out and grabbed her, pulling her into the SUV before the strange man could act. The Prado sped off instantly. Adis was shaking so hard she couldn't speak. Madame Chinya held her face firmly. "Are you hurt?" Adis burst into tears. Who was he? Why is this happening? The woman swallowed painfully. "Because the world finally knows who you are. And they want to use you against me." Adis clung to her, terrified. This was no longer about tuition. This was survival. The SUV drove for nearly an hour before turning into a quiet estate far from campus. High walls. Security cameras. Armed guards. Madame Chinya led Adis inside a large duplex filled with expensive furniture but a cold, lonely atmosphere. "This will be your temporary home," she said softly. Adis looked around nervously. "I can't stay here. I have classes." "You will attend classes with protection," the woman said firmly. "You are no longer safe on your own." Adis sat on the couch, overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why hide everything?" Madame Chinya sank into a seat opposite her. For once, she didn't hide her exhaustion. "Because I hoped the past would stay buried. I prayed you would have a normal life. But the moment you stepped into my car, the moment someone took that photo, everything changed." Adis hugged herself. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Madame Chinya whispered. "But fate doesn't ask permission." That night, Adis was shown to a comfortable bedroom. The bed was soft, the room warm, but she couldn't sleep. Her life had shifted in one day, from an orphan selling roasted corn to a haunted heir protected in a mansion. She stared out the window, wondering if life would ever return to normal. But deep in her heart, she knew it wouldn't. At dawn, Adis woke to a soft knock on her door. A female guard entered with breakfast. The woman was muscular, expressionless, and clearly trained. "You'll be escorted to school in an unmarked vehicle," she said. "Stay close." Addis nodded silently. On the ride to campus, Addis watched the passing streets with a heavy heart. Students laughed along the sidewalks, vendors called out, life continued as normal except hers. When they reached school, the guard accompanied her to class. Everyone stared. Whispers grew. "She has a bodyguard. This girl is something else." But Addis kept her head down. During a break, she went to the restroom to breathe. As she washed her face, she felt a strange sensation, like someone watching. She lifted her head slowly. In the mirror's reflection, outside the window behind her, a man's face flashed briefly before disappearing. The same rugged man from last night. Addis' breath hitched. She stumbled back and ran out, calling the guard immediately. By the time security searched the area, the man was gone. But the message was clear. He wasn't finished. And neither were the people behind him. Classes ended early because of a campus power outage. The guard led Addis back toward the car when a sleek black Mercedes arrived. A man in a gray suit stepped out. He carried himself with confidence, the type that comes from wealth and danger combined. "Miss Addis," he greeted with a cold smile. "My boss wishes to speak with you." The guard blocked him instantly. "Step back." The man chuckled. "Tell Madam Chinya that the time has come. The girl belongs with us now." Addis felt ice run through her veins. "Belongs, with who?" The man's smile widened. "With the ones who protected her father's empire after he died. We kept everything intact. You are the rightful successor, and we need you." Addis shook her head slowly. "I don't want any empire." "That's unfortunate," he replied. "Because whether you want it or not, you into the car and shut the door." As they drove off, Addis trembled uncontrollably. Everyone wanted something from her. Her identity had become a prize. And she didn't even understand the rules of the game. Back at the safe house, Addis confronted Madam Chinya immediately. "Tell me everything. No more secrets." The woman looked exhausted, almost defeated. "You were never supposed to be dragged into this," she whispered. "Your father, he was a powerful businessman. His empire was worth billions. When he died, people fought to control his legacy. And me?" Addis whispered. "What do they want with me?" "You are the only legitimate heir," Madam Chinya replied painfully. "Your father left everything in your name. But because you were a child, they tried to take control. I ran with you to protect you." Addis felt dizzy. "So these men, they want the wealth? They want control," the woman said. "And if they cannot have you willingly, they might use force." Madam Chinya's voice broke. "I have been fighting them for years. But now that they've seen you alive, they won't stop." Addis' heart pounded. Suddenly, she understood why Madam Chinya always watched her from afar, why she lived in fear, why she kept her distance despite her love. For the first time, Addis felt something deeper than fear. Responsibility. The next day on campus, Addis felt like a fragile thread stretched too tight. The whispers, the stares, the guards, everything pressed down on her like a weight she wasn't strong enough to lift. During a lecture, the professor asked her a simple question. Her mind went blank. The room spun. "Addis, are you okay?" the professor asked. But Addis couldn't answer. Her breathing grew rapid. She felt trapped, exposed, haunted. Students murmured nervously as she stumbled out of the hall, collapsing near the corridor. Kamsi ran to her, terrified. "Addis, what's happening?" Tears streamed down Addis' face uncontrollably. "I didn't ask for this life. I just wanted to study, to survive, to be normal." Her guard signaled for the car immediately. As they drove her back to the safe house, Addis buried her face in her hands, shaking violently. She was breaking. Not because she was weak, but because she had carried too much alone for too long. When they reached the house, Madame Chinya rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Let it out," she whispered. "Cry. Scream. You're allowed to." And Addis did. For the first time, she cried not like a survivor, but like a child who finally knew she had someone to lean on. That night, Madame Chinya sat beside Addis' bed, gently massaging her shoulders like a mother comforting her own daughter. Something about her touch felt familiar, like the warmth Addis always imagined but never had. "You're stronger than you think," the woman whispered. Addis wiped her eyes. "I'm tired." "Why won't they just leave us alone?" "Because power is an addiction," Madame Chinya replied. "And you are the key to a power your father left behind." Addis looked at her, searching her face. "Why didn't you claim me publicly? Why hide me?" "Because if the world knew you were my daughter," she whispered, "you would have died before you turned 10. Addis' heart twisted. The woman wasn't perfect. She wasn't faultless. But she was a mother who loved fiercely, even from a distance. Addis reached for her hand. "You should have told me earlier." Madame Chinya's eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid you would hate me." "I don't hate you," Addis whispered. "I just wish things were different." The woman smiled sadly and kissed her forehead. "So do I." For the first time, Addis fell asleep with a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, she would face the world again. But tonight, she rested, surrounded by a love she finally understood. The next morning, Madame Kesa arrived at the college quietly, without security or her usual convoy. She wore a simple dress and carried a small basket in her hand. Zoe was shocked. She had never seen the powerful businesswoman look so humble. Madame Kesa requested a private meeting, and Zoe hesitantly agreed. Inside the empty lecture hall, Madame Kesa opened the basket. Inside were roasted corn and groundnuts, the food Zoe grew up selling. "I want to understand your world," Madame Kesa said softly. "I want to know the struggles you survived." Zoe stared at the basket for a long time, a mixture of anger and tenderness swirling inside her. No one had ever made an effort to understand her pain. They always judged her by her poverty. Madame Kesa's gesture didn't heal everything, but it cracked open a small door, a path to forgiveness, even if the journey was still long. Even though Zoe tried to continue her life quietly, the college atmosphere only grew heavier. Some lecturers treated her differently now, offering extra attention. Some students accused her of using her mother's influence to get special treatment. WhatsApp groups buzzed with gossip. Girls in her department formed a small clique dedicated to attacking her reputation. They claimed she had always pretended to be poor to gain sympathy. The pressure built until Zoe began avoiding crowded areas. She stopped sitting in the cafeteria and started eating alone under the old mango tree behind the library. But deep inside, she promised herself she would not let anyone chase her away from the education she fought so hard for. If they tried to intimidate her, she would rise even higher, not for them, but for the girl she was before success came knocking. One cold evening, while Zoe sat under the mango tree, two familiar voices approached, Cody and Pendo, her closest friends from first year. They had once sowed roasted corn with her during exam weeks, laughing even when life felt heavy. But as Zoe became busy with work and then fame, they slowly drifted away. Now, they returned with shy smiles and a bag of boiled groundnuts. "We miss you," Pendo said quietly. "We were scared of losing you," Cody added. Zoe felt tears stain her eyes. She had been surrounded by noise, jealousy, and gossip for days, but this moment, the return of the people who knew her before anything changed, warmed her spirit. They sat together under the tree, eating and talking until late evening, just like before. For the first time in weeks, Zoe laughed from the heart. That night, Zoe returned to her hostel to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a short letter written with trembling handwriting. I owe you the truth. Meet me behind the chapel tomorrow at noon. There was no name. Zoe's heart pounded. Was it from someone trying to hurt her? A jealous student? Or someone connected to her past? She couldn't sleep. Every possible idea spun through her mind. When morning came, her body was trembling with anxiety. She prayed silently, then prepared herself. She didn't know who wrote the letter, but she knew one thing: she was strong enough to face any truth now. Her journey had taught her that running only gave fear more power. And Zoe was no longer the frightened orphan she once was. At noon, Zoe walked behind the chapel, a quiet place with abandoned flower pots and stone benches. A slim elderly woman stepped forward. Zoe didn't recognize her immediately, but something about her felt familiar. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, I was the midwife the night you were born. Zoe froze. The woman explained everything: how Madame Kesa had been forced by a powerful father to abandon her newborn. How she, the midwife, had tried to stop it but had no power. How she had followed Zoe's life from a distance, carrying guilt for decades. Her hands shook as she held out an old hospital tag with Zoe's birth date written on it. Zoe's knees weakened. This truth was heavier than anything she had expected. But it finally answered the question she had carried all her life: why was I abandoned? Zoe's heart and healed it at the same time. For years she believed she was unwanted. But now she knew someone, even a stranger, had cared enough to remember her. At the same time, pain stung her chest knowing her mother had not abandoned her willingly. The injustice she endured was because someone else played God with her destiny. When Zoe walked away from the chapel, her steps were heavy. She felt like she was carrying her younger self, the hungry child, the crying baby, the broken girl who sold corn under the hot sun, and whispering to her, it wasn't your fault. For the first time in her life, Zoe allowed herself to cry freely. Not from pain alone, but from the relief of finally knowing the truth. When Madame Kesa learned about the midwife's visit, she rushed to her private office and broke down. The truth she avoided for decades was now uncovered. She paced the room, trembling. My father destroyed my life, and hers, she whispered. The guilt crushed her. She remembered the night she gave birth, the pain, the confusion, the moment her own father forced the baby away. It was the memory she tried to bury under success and wealth. Now she wanted to make things right. But she feared Zoe's pain, anger, and possible rejection. Madame Kesa felt helpless for the first time in years. But she vowed one thing: I will not lose her again. Not this time. Her determination marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would fight for her daughter, no matter the cost. While Zoe and Madame Kesa battled emotional storms, unseen enemies made their move. A group of jealous students, led by Brenda, a notorious troublemaker, created a plan to destroy Zoe completely. They spread lies that Zoe paid lecturers for grades. They edited fake screenshots showing her insulting the school. And worst of all, they plotted to frame her for stealing scholarship funds. Their plan was simple: ruin Zoe's reputation before the school senate. Many students who envied her sudden rise quickly joined in. Gossip traveled faster than truth, and soon the entire campus buzzed with accusations. Zoe had no idea a storm was forming, stronger than anything she had faced before. The next morning, Zoe entered class only to find everyone staring at her phones. A fake audio recording had been shared across campus, a voice that sounded like her insulting the school and belittling poor students. The shock hit her like a slap. She shook her head, trembling. This is not me. I never said this. But the damage had begun. Even some lecturers looked at her suspiciously. Zoe felt her chest tighten. She had survived hunger, abandonment, and heartbreak, but betrayal from people she shared classrooms with cut deeper. She left the class quietly, her heart racing, unsure how much more she could take. But she whispered to herself, "I will not break." Because she knew that the journey of a fighter is never smooth, but victory belongs to the one who refuses to fall. After learning about the fake recordings and false accusations, Madame Kesa arrived at the college with a quiet storm of authority. She requested an immediate meeting with the school dean, professors, and student representatives. The room was tense as her presence alone demanded respect. With a calm yet commanding voice, she exposed the lies, presented proof of Zoe's innocence, and reminded everyone of the consequences of spreading falsehoods. Zoe watched from behind the curtain, her heart pounding. She had never seen a woman so powerful, so precise in handling chaos. For the first time, Zoe felt the weight of her mother's love, not just affection, but a fierce, protective force willing to crush anyone threatening her child. The room erupted in whispers, but nobody dared oppose Madame Kesa. Zoe realized that from now on, her life was intertwined with someone who would fight battles she couldn't imagine. The following days were filled with cautious adjustments. Some students apologized, others remained cold. Zoe returned to classes with her head held high, but the shadows of betrayal lingered. She found solace in her friends Kadi and Pendo, who stood by her despite the chaos. Together, they helped her navigate the tricky landscape of campus politics, gossip, and envy. Meanwhile, Madame Kese quietly arranged for extra security around Zoe. The guards were discreet but firm, reminding everyone that Zoe was no longer an ordinary student. While some envied her, others began to respect the girl who had survived poverty, false rumors, and campus sabotage. Zoe felt a flicker of pride. For the first time, she understood the power of resilience and the protective force of family, even if that family had once been hidden from her. Unknown to Zoe, one of the students who initially opposed her had secretly switched sides. Teo, a quiet, intelligent student, had been observing the attacks and recognized the injustice. He approached Zoe discreetly with a warning, "They're not done yet. Some people see you as a threat to their ambitions. You need allies." Zoe hesitated. Trust didn't come easily anymore. Yet Teo's sincerity was evident. Slowly, she began sharing her concerns with him, including the identity of her mother and the recent threats. Together, they started crafting a plan to counteract any further sabotage. This unexpected alliance reminded Zoe that survival didn't always mean fighting alone. Sometimes, it meant carefully choosing those who stood beside her. Despite Madame Kesa's intervention, the fake rumors reached the scholarship committee. A sudden review was called, putting Zoe's tuition coverage at risk. The tension was unbearable. Losing the scholarship would mean returning to selling roasted corn, which she could not afford anymore. Madame Kesa met Zoe privately. "They may challenge you, but I will ensure your rights are protected. You are not alone in this." Her words gave Zoe courage. That day, she attended the review meeting, standing tall and composed. With evidence, witnesses, and Madame Kesa's influence, the committee not only confirmed her scholarship but also reprimanded those responsible for spreading falsehoods. It was a victory, small, yet monumental, and it strengthened Zoe's resolve to face any storm. After the scholarship drama, Zoe finally experienced a day of calm. She spent hours under the old mango tree with Cuddy and Pendo, laughing and sharing stories like the days before wealth and scandal reached her life. The peace was fleeting but priceless. That evening, Madame Kesa joined them, surprisingly relaxed. She shared a rare story about her younger years, revealing vulnerability and wisdom Zoe hadn't seen before. In that moment, Zoe realized that the woman she once feared was capable of tenderness, humor, and the kind of love she had longed for. It reminded her that while life was complicated and dangerous, family, even one discovered late, could provide shelter against the storm. One morning, Zoe received a sealed envelope in her hostel room. Inside was a golden invitation, an exclusive gala at the city's most luxurious hotel. No sender's name, only a note, "Your presence is requested. Secrets will be revealed." Zoe hesitated. Was it a trap? Another attempt to intimidate her? Or an opportunity to understand more about her father's empire and her mother's world? She decided to attend, cautiously. Dressed in a simple but elegant gown, she entered the hotel ballroom, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. The night promised revelations that could change the trajectory of her life once again. At the gala, Zoe recognized several familiar faces, people her mother had interacted with in business, some of her father's former associates, and even students who had previously attacked her. Each glance carried judgment, curiosity, or thinly veiled at her side, radiating confidence and authority. She whispered, "These people know your story, but tonight, you control the narrative." Zoe took a deep breath, realizing that for the first time, she wasn't merely surviving life, she was participating in shaping it. Every step, every glance, every word could define her reputation, her legacy, and her future. Midway through the evening, a large screen in the ballroom displayed archival footage of Zoe's father, a young, ambitious man with vision and courage. Madame Caesar's voice echoed, "This is the man who fought for his family, his legacy, and the future of this empire. His daughter now stands among us, carrying his blood and his dreams." The room went silent. Zoe felt tears prick her eyes as she watched her father's life unfold on the screen. Every hardship she had endured now made sense. She was not just a girl who had survived, she was the rightful heir to a legacy built with courage, sacrifice, and love. Suddenly, the room's energy shifted. A few former allies of her father, men whose intentions were dark, stepped forward, glaring at Zoe. They whispered among themselves, plotting to challenge her inheritance, her mother's authority, and her growing influence. Madame Caesar stepped in, firm and unyielding. "Anyone who tries to harm my daughter will face the consequences." The room held its breath. Zoe realized she was stepping into a world filled with powerful enemies, a world where wealth and influence came with danger. But she was no longer afraid. The storms of her past had prepared her to face these adversaries with courage and cunning. After the gala, Zoe walked with Madame Caesar in the hotel's quiet garden. The night was cool, the lights reflecting softly in the fountain. "Mother," Zoe whispered, using the word for the first time aloud, "I don't know if I can live this life. It's too much." Madame Caesar held her hands gently. "You don't have to do it alone. Every step, every choice, you have me by your side." Zoe took a deep breath. "Then I choose to stay. To fight. To live the life I was born for, not for their expectations, but for me, for my father, and for us." Madame Caesar smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. That night, daughter and mother became partners, not just in blood, but in the journey that lay ahead. Zoe's life had become a delicate balance between school, her mother's empire, and growing threats. One afternoon, a heavily suited man appeared in her lecture hall, silently observing her. The whisper started again, but this time, it wasn't just jealousy. The man carried an air of menace, his eyes fixed on her as though he had studied her for weeks. After class, he approached her discreetly. "You are too close to the inheritance. Step aside, or you will regret it." Zoe's chest tightened. She had faced fake rumors, false accusations, and fear before, but this was different. The danger was tangible, immediate. She rushed to inform Madame Caesar. Together, mother and daughter devised a plan. They would confront the threat directly, using strategy, wit, and the influence her mother commanded. Zoe realized that survival was no longer just about avoiding harm, it was about facing enemies head-on, just like her father would have. The following evening, they arranged a meeting in a neutral location. Zoe and Madame Caesar arrived, composed and prepared. The man who had threatened her stepped forward, flanked by two accomplices. "I warned you," he said coldly. "This empire does not belong to you." Madame Caesar's eyes blazed. "It belongs to her," she said firmly. And anyone who underestimates her will regret it. Zoe stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. You want power. But I survived hunger, abandonment, and betrayal. You think a few threats will scare me? The man hesitated, realizing Zoe was not the fragile girl he had imagined. Slowly, he stepped back, recognizing that the girl who had once sold roasted corn had become a force to be reckoned with. Teo, Zoe's loyal ally, arrived unexpectedly with evidence of the man's illegal schemes. Together, they exposed his plans to take over the empire illegally. The accomplices fled, leaving the leader stunned and defeated. Zoe felt a surge of triumph. Her life was no longer at the mercy of whispers and threats. She had allies, strategy, and courage, and she had discovered that the strength of her past hardships had prepared her for this moment. Madame Kesa smiled at her daughter. You've grown into the leader I always hoped you would be. Zoe felt a mix of pride and relief. For the first time, she could breathe without fear. Returning to campus, Zoe walked with confidence. Students no longer whispered insults. They watched with admiration and respect. Those who had plotted against her began to keep their distance, recognizing the change in her presence. Zoe's academic performance soared. She helped peers in need, balancing studies, strategy, and her mother's guidance. Cody and Pendo stayed by her side, laughing and working together as if the darkness of past rumors had been washed away. For the first time in years, Zoe felt safe, valued, and ready to embrace the life that had once seemed impossible. Madame Kesa and Zoe spent evenings discussing the future, the empire, the college, and the legacy of her father. Every plan, every decision, became a shared journey. Do you ever regret hiding me? Zoe asked one night. Madame Kesa shook her head. No. I did what I had to for your safety. But now, I am here. And we will face everything together. Zoe hugged her tightly, feeling the love she had longed for all her life. It was imperfect, late, but real. For the first time, she felt truly whole. The college held an award ceremony, recognizing students who had overcome adversity. Zoe was honored for her resilience, intelligence, and courage. Standing on stage, she felt the weight of her journey, from a hungry orphan selling roasted corn, to a target of envy and rumors, to a young woman capable of facing threats and commanding respect. Applause thundered around her. She looked at Madame Kesa in the audience, tears glistening, and knew that no amount of wealth or power could replace the feeling of being seen, understood, and loved. After the ceremony, a man approached her. It was the same stranger who had threatened her earlier, now humbled and cautious. I underestimated you, he said. You are stronger than I imagined. Strength is earned, not given. And I've learned the hard way. The man nodded, leaving without further threat. Zoe felt a strange satisfaction, that even those who sought to harm her recognized her resilience. With the immediate threats neutralized, Madame Kesa began introducing Zoe to the family business. She attended meetings, learned about management, and made decisions alongside her mother. Every step was daunting, but Zoe's past struggles gave her clarity. She understood the value of hard work, integrity, and patience. Slowly, she grew into her role, balancing compassion with authority. She realized that surviving her past had not just been about endurance, it had been preparation for leadership. One weekend, Zoe returned to her childhood village. She visited the streets she had once roamed, selling corn, and the little houses that had once seemed like her entire world. The villagers greeted her with awe and warmth. Children ran up, eager to see the girl who had left and returned stronger. Zoe walked slowly, soaking in every memory, the struggles, the laughter, and the lessons that had shaped her. She realized that even though she had risen above poverty and threats, the village remained her anchor, the place where resilience was born. Zoe stood atop a hill overlooking the village at sunset, Madame Kesa beside her. The sky blazed in orange and purple hues, the winds carrying whispers of the past. I finally understand, Zay said softly. Every hardship, every betrayal, it brought me here. Not just to survive, but to thrive. Madame Kayser squeezed her hand. And you've done it with courage, love, and wisdom. Zoe smiled, her heart full. She thought of the girl who had once sold roasted corn, lonely and abandoned, and she realized she had never truly been alone. Every challenge, every sacrifice, every revelation had led her here, to strength, to love, to family, and to the legacy of a life reclaimed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Zoe whispered a quiet promise to herself: no matter what storms came next, she would face them, not as a frightened orphan, but as a young woman who had claimed her destiny. The journey had ended. And yet, it had only just begun.